Welcome to the Youth Enviro Show. I go by the name of Esther.
And I'm Sharissa.
And this is our third episode of climate change.
Hey, and we love the fact that you are commenting, liking, and sharing this with your family and friends. Please continue to do so.
In these episodes, or let me say in this show, we are not only going to talk about climate change, we'll be talking about all the environmental related aspects. So don't go away,
because we will be right back.
Hi, my name is Marcelina Shisupa and I use recyclable material to make such projects. I'm mostly comfortable making bags, as you can see, but recently I've been involved in a project to create garments. I started to do this because I was introduced by it while I was doing an assignment, and I made research about it. And I found out that plastics, though they don't necessarily decompose, and when they do, they actually take 1,000 years to do so. And I was very shocked because humans don't even live that long. Imagine now having to live with plastics for that long. Basically, that inspired me to work with plastics to help somehow the environment with such an issue. So my hope is to make more people aware of the effects of plastics on the environment, and that we may minimize, because plastics are great pollutants and they are also a danger for marine life. So may we use plastics for better cause, or may we just completely stop using them. So guys, I am still working with plastics and I'm involved in another project. I'm creating garments, just one garment with the plastic bags, recycled plastic bags, and I'm very excited to share with you guys, and I hope to see you next time, and I'll be having something to show you again. Thank you.
Welcome back. Previously, we have shared with you what climate change is, as well as what effect does climate change has on migration.
Yeah, how animals and human beings are leaving their place of habitat, looking for a new place of livelihood, but unfortunately, they end up dying along the way.
Because if you look at it, climate change also causes an impact on human rights.
Human rights? Man, that sounds so like empowering and, law-ish. But Esther, what is human rights?
Before I actually tell you about human rights, what if you guys, I change this question to you. What if you answer there just down right below, because we would really like to hear from you. But let me give it a try. Basically, human rights are rights that believed to belong to each one of us. Rights such as I have the right and you have the right. Each person has the right to have a name.
So it's like a right to sanitation.
Yes, rights to food.
So then that brings us to today's topic, which is climate change and human rights.
And our famous question is, how does climate change affect human rights? As we have identified human rights such as right to food, right to life, right to
water, sanitation.
That's correct.
And housing. And as you have stated, the fundamental rights that we have, I'd like to talk about one, which is the right to life. Did you know that every year 150,000 premature deaths are related to the climate crisis? So which means people are prematurely dying off through causes such as floods.
For example, we have spoken in our previous episode that in an island, the flood actually submerged the whole island, and then people are now forced to move out. So not everybody make it actually to the land. Many people, they die within that flooding island space, and that's actually causing premature death.
And then also another right that is being affected is our health. Now you might be wondering, how is that possible? Well, you know what happens when there's a flood, and when nature calls, some of us like to go in the bushes, and that is also close to like a mini river or a stream, and children love to play by those rivers and streams. And you know what? Those little annoying ones.
Yes, they're called mosquitoes. Actually, mosquito transfer malaria from one person to another. However, we are not saying that malaria is caused entirely by climate change, but it also, climate change actually contributes to it.
Yeah, to the extended growth of it.
That's correct. Another human right that is affected by climate change is rights to clean water. Due to excessive drought and low rainfall caused by climate change, many people, especially to rural areas, are actually depending in a water pond that used to sustain them from January to December. But because of climate change, this water has actually evaporates more, and then leaving this water to be contaminated.
Oh, and it's just the mud that is left.
Yeah.
Oh, but I also have to add, right, with water. So it can be like our water is being reduced. So which means people that actually use water for businesses would then have to close down their business, and then that adds to the rate of unemployment.
Besides that, when a person is actually not able to access to clean water, then they are forced to bath with dirty water. And imagine you are bathing with smelling water. How is it affecting your life? Because this one is deteriorating our rights.
Exactly. And Esther, you know the famous slogan, right? That water is life?
Yes, and actually without water, how can we have food?
True.
And this actually brings us to our fourth human rights, which is actually deteriorated by climate change. Rights to food. Agriculture. Due to climate change, there is low rainfall and drought. Productivity is actually decreased, and this is causing us to have low food production, and this is actually affecting our human rights.
Yes, and like you mentioned last week about, the 5-year drought in Angola, and how they're moving over to Namibia. Imagine the climate refugees, what would happen to them along the way with not being able to find food.
Most of them, especially children, they don't survive.
So speaking about agriculture, then that means that the beef production will also decrease because of the drought.
Exactly. And if you look at it, even chicken is what I love. Chicken. What do you like?
I like beef. That's why I'm sad.
Do you love lamb? Because as for me, I like chicken. Okay. Talking about other meats such as goat's meat as well as lamb. Due to climate change, soon or later, we will not be able to eat our favorite meat any longer.
Man, that would be so sad. But hold on, we do have an interview for us with an environmental lawyer.
So stay tuned, don't go away.
Hi everyone. Well, today we have brought you an interview regarding climate change and how it affects human rights. But I'm joined with this lovely lady. Would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, my name is Natalia Hayter and I have Masters in Environmental Law.
Please tell us, how did you become interested in environmental law?
So when I finished my undergrad at the University of Namibia, so I decided to go a different route because most of my colleagues were mostly focused on corporate. So I wanted to do something different, so I decided to actually do environmental law.
Yeah, well, that is so interesting. If it's possible, please quickly give us a breakdown. What exactly is environmental law? You are protecting our plants and the animals?
So environmental law is it's actually just to study laws that regulate or protect our conduct towards the environment. So generally just to regulate, just as any other legislation, just to regulate what we do as humans towards our environment that provides for us. So it's just legislation that regulates what in relation to our contact towards the environment. Plants, it can be animals that we find on earth or in the sea. So it's just a way of regulating our conduct when it comes to the environment.
Nice. I also want to ask, how does climate change affect human rights?
So climate change affects human rights in a way that, the impact or effects of climate change is usually drought, floods, basically. So when there's droughts, for instance, that means that there's not enough food, for instance, right? Then that affects rise to life, because if you don't have anything to eat, then obviously you can't survive. Those are some of the basic human needs of survival for them to survive. So, and then when it comes to floods, sometimes, when these floods, people are displaced, and then when they are displaced, they won't have adequate shelter or access to adequate housing. So it affects their right to housing. And as we know, when it comes to environmental law, in some jurisdiction, for instance, if I can give an example in South Africa, it provides the right to housing. So that means if people are displaced because of the effect of climate change, so their right to housing or to adequate housing is affected. Their right to life is affected. So if they cannot have access to clean water, so that means their right to adequate clean water is also affected in terms of jurisdiction that provides those certain rights. So that's how climate change affects human rights.
I would like to ask, what are the laws regarding the environment, and has there been any new laws that were added within the next 2 years or before the 2 years?
Okay, thank you for the question. Okay, currently the main legislation that regulates the environment in Namibia is the Environmental Management Act. That's an overarching legislation that we currently have. In the past 2 or 3 years, the law that was recently enacted was the one on access and biological resources and genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge. It's also part of one of the laws that actually regulates our environment. This one is mostly focusing on how do we benefit from the resources that we can derive from the environment? How do we benefit from that? And then it's also protecting the traditional knowledge that as a community or our communities in Namibia have in relation to those resources that we find in our environment. So, and then there's also other laws that regulates pollution, but it's mainly also just focused or encompassed in this main legislation, the overarching legislation on environment, which is EMMA in short.
EMMA. Well, as we all know, right, that with our rights come responsibility. So I would like to find out your opinion or your advice on how, socially, what are our responsibility to the environment?
Yes. Okay, so at least government is also doing, as we know, it's doing its part when it's coming up with laws. But laws are also made for us as individual or as a community to at least comply with. It comes with obligations, of course, and responsibility, as you mentioned. It's just for us as an individual to at least comply with those laws and to ensure that we protect our environment, because that's where we derive most of the things that we use or the things that we have to sustain our livelihood. So it's very important. For instance, where you can, please don't waste water or don't pollute your environment. Those are our social responsibility, even at the individual level that we have. And in short, everybody has a responsibility from the individual level. So let's take care of our environment because we depend on it.
Exactly, because then, I mean, at the end of the day, we can't individually be the ones that, you know, we're depleting our resources. Then at the end of the day, we're crying, no, but our country needs to do better because, you know, it starts with us, it starts at home.
Definitely, you put it very well.
Well, Miss Natalia, I just want to say thank you so much for the time that you made to talk to us and to share your advice and your knowledge with us. Hopefully this won't be the last time. We'll always need more of your advice.
The pleasure was mine. Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it, guys. This was Miss Natalia Hayter. She is in environmental law, and you know, make sure that you are reading up, doing your research, because you might be interested in, you know, fighting for our environment. Well, but that was it for today, so we'll catch you again next time. Bye. And we're back. I hope you guys are learning from these interviews because, like we say, we are always learning and we love to learn.
It was mouthful, eh?
Yeah. Now, you know, I know that you've probably noticed, of the fundamental human rights, we only mentioned 4, but we still have 2 more to explain to you.
And one of them that we have to explain to you now is right to housing. I have the right to housing. I have the right to shelter. You have the right to shelter as well. But climate change has actually impacted the human rights when it comes to this aspect. Let's talk about the habitats that live in islands. Here in Namibia, for example, there are people that live that side of the Zambezi River. They actually have to be relocated every time it floods. And this is actually causing them to not have rights to housing, because one time you're moving from one place to another, you have to be relocated, your house has to be demolished by water. And it's very devastating.
It is. And also, if you think about it, for people who build their homes from recycled material, and with the increasing temperatures such as heat waves, these materials are actually deteriorating. So which means then their houses are yet again, like she said, being demolished. Then they have to move, look for new materials. And for these people, this is actually a home, this is a shelter, and it is their right to be protected against harmful causes of nature.
And that brought us actually to our last human right to adequate standard living. Look, if you don't have access to clean water, if you don't have access to a house, you don't have access to food, how can I have a good life? Exactly.
I mean, if you think about it, we would be unhappy because imagine you are smiling, you know, you're enjoying life, you go to work because we have the basics, the fundamental rights, such as a home, like Esther mentioned. But once one of those things are taken away, or imagine even all of them, how would you be? You would be an unhappy person, and which means the standard of your living is actually very low.
And this is actually the reason why we are talking about climate change, because we can now see the effects of climate change, that it doesn't just affect people from moving one place to another, but as well as it affects all our human rights. And this is the reason why you and I need to curb climate change by switching off the lights when it's not used,
and for us to reuse, reduce, and recycle.
As from me, Esther,
and me, Sharissa,
it's always a pleasure to have you on the other side.
So we'll catch you next week.
Tot ziens.